I think we've got Brian on
Hello,
right now.
Brian.
Hi, how are we doing?
This is
All right, how are
Jana, my
you?
co-host.
I'm
Jana,
good.
this is
I'm good.
Brian. Brian. So yeah, do you want to start off with questioning Brian? John, you probably heard what he's all about. And you know he's an expert on the gin. Do you want to go ahead, kick us off?
Uh, Not really. Why don't you kick us off and I'll join in?
Okay. So the Shake was a no-show, which was a bit, a bit upsetting. As I've been telling you recently, since the first encounter with him and the second encounter, I had an encounter again. I find myself in a desert, barefoot. The sand is underneath my feet, and then he's basically there. And there's a djinn there, and the djinn looks like the Pinhead character in Hellraiser. And basically then he tells me that, to do a pact with the djinn. I did start to do a pact. I did think, firstly I asked for a house, then he sort of went off, and then I kind of got to thinking, why do I need to ask for a house, at my age, and, I'm okay, as long as I've got God. So I kind of cancel that if it be possible. And then he appeared again with the djinn, again astral. It wasn't a dream, it is an astral experience, and I'm sure my listeners are up with that and what it means. And it seems to take place in this desert and near this portal, which leads to the world of the jinn. I was told it was a Majid, and I think you mentioned to me that type. And I asked why, if he was a good jinn, that I was seeing him as the character Pinhead in Hellraiser. And he told me that that was just my eyes seeing him that way, and that he wasn't like that. It was just my mind showing that. And then I did see him looking exactly the same as that, but without the pins, and his skin was really shining. And I thought of the name The Shining Ones that I've heard before, and I can't remember what context I've heard it in. And then his eyes seemed like they had portals. And the sheikh said, I should do a pact with him. And I think I asked for success with my book. I again asked for money, and then what they asked for back of me was that I would bring them people by telling people about them either in a book or whatever way I could, that introducing people to their world, I suppose in the way the Sheikh does, and telling people that it was a good thing. I then asked them what was going on in the world today, like with the COVID and the lockdown and us being probably forcibly injected, that did that have anything to do with the jinn? And they said that it didn't. And I asked who was that, and they basically said it was just really humanity, the top level of elites who basically didn't want us around, as you were saying, Brian, a sort of a cull, and they said it wasn't to do with them basically. But they wanted me to introduce people to them. I don't know whether it would be through writing or what. So what do you think of that so far? The Sheikh is a no-show, so that's a bit sad, isn't it?
I told you that earlier on.
Did you? What did you say?
I remember I said to you, I actually sent you a message, remember? So,
Remind me?
Just describing the situation to you.
Could you do it again for the listeners?
I just said that you have to be very careful with people who deal with the jinn, because they are so linked in to their host. It's very difficult to decide which one is the jinn and which one is the human. And of course, that they want energy, and to get energy, they need the victim as distressed as possible. So they tend to be deceitful, lie, manipulate, so that the person is voluntarily giving them energy all of the time. That essentially that's what it's about, and that's why they tend to be very deceptive, and that's why they tend to lie, because it's not a question of having a normal relationship with you. Is they want an almost symbiotic relationship based on energy.
So the Sheikh wants a symbiotic relationship with me, or the jinn?
Misgot it with the Djinn, but the Djinn wants the energy.
Right. And could you explain?
Sorry, you cut out.
I know I keep.
It's cut out again.
You drop in.
I know. Could you explain to the listener why the Djinn why he looked like Pinhead of Hellraiser, one of the Cenobites, actually?
Well, they did. He told you himself. Essentially, they appear as you want them to appear. They don't have shape at all. The shape is the shape that we've given them. I mean the whole thing about the Djinn is that they what you call, it comes from the Arabic Jannah, which means to be hidden, and they do everything they can to stop you understanding what their form is or what their name is. So essentially, they look exactly as you want them to look, but that doesn't necessarily mean to say that that is in fact the look that they have taken.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah, because if I think about the movie Hellraiser, I remember being quite fascinated by it and being quite fascinated by the Cenobites when they appeared. And actually, they did appear by the guy opening a box. And then they appeared, they were like, "We are here." And there was, I think, 4 of them. And they did come to grant wishes. And they did actually take energy. So I don't know if Clive Barker based them on the Djinn, or maybe he's involved with the Djinn, and maybe they... But I guess it's not a great advertisement for them, really, is it?
Well, I mean, the thing it's all, it's the Djinn appear throughout history. I mean, probably one of the most famous incarnations of the Djinn, of course, is Count Dracula.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, essentially, Bram Stoker was a member of Masonic orders. He was also a member of the Golden Dawn. And he was a lifetime occultist, and he would know about the shape-shifting Djinn. And he also knew about the legends of Dracula and the cult of the Dracul, the cult of the dragon, if you wish. And I think he just mixed in all these mythologies together to form the Dracula. But if Dracula does mimic a Djinn called the Ghoul, or the Ghoul, whichever you want to look at it. And the Ghoul is a shapeshifter, ordinarily an attractive woman. Ordinarily, however, it is a shapeshifter, and I believe that was probably the inspiration for Dracula.
And the cult of the dragon, are they Djinn? Is that a Djinn group?
I think the cult of the dragon just made Dracula that little bit more sexy, to put it bluntly. Right. His father was a member of the Order of the Dragon. There's a very spurious relationship between the Order of the Dragon and the Church. That also makes it very spicy as well, to write a story, obviously. There's a lot of intrigue there, there's a lot of skullduggery. And of course, Dracula himself, interestingly, he was, I think, he is a Catholic saint on some level. He was, there are stained glass windows where you can see Dracula as a saint. So, there's enough, I think there's enough mysticism in there and enough, if you like, contradiction to make him a very, very interesting character, especially if you blend him in with the traits of the Ghoul, the Ghoul Djinn, who are shape-shifting and feed on human flesh. Although, interestingly, the feeding on human flesh is something Galland put in later in the original 1001 Nights. They don't dig up graves to eat flesh. They tend to attack mortals as opposed to digging up graves. So Galland actually threw that in. but you could, but when you actually understand, when you read the 2001 and the 2001 Nights, and then you look at the relationship between the ghoul and Dracula, it's alarmingly similar.
And that one that I saw, he had a weird. His eyes were a portal, so at one point he sucked me through his eyes, and then I think I was mentioning it last week how he took my organs and put them in jars, and then broke my skeleton up and showed me what it'd be like to be dead. Why did I go through a portal in his eyes? Is there any relevance there?
Well, essentially, you go into their world, don't you? I mean, you have to understand that the Djinn is probably one of the oldest forms of worship in the world. They crop up in literally every single mythology that you can imagine. For example, if you read about fairies, the fairies which we always presume to be English, actually they really have the identity of the Djinn. They steal babies.
Yeah, you're right. I thought that today, the Fae of the Djinn. Yeah.
And the thing is that if you read the fairy mythos, the victim is always put into a world which is incredibly strange, and that world, of course, is the mythical emerald mountain range called the Calf, which encircles our Earth. However, it's invisible to humanity. So essentially, the fairy that such takes them into this world, and in this world they lose all time, and they lose their identity, and they usually come back insane, or they come back just not the same type of person.
And do you think that maybe this is its alien abductions, where they do these anal probes and all that?
I mean, once again,
I know Rosemary Guiley was going around saying that, wasn't she?
Well, yeah. I mean, I believe it was you who told me that most of these abductions are astral.
They're astral. I interviewed Joseph Jordan from MUFON, and he said to me they're astral, and I said I've had them. But mine were only astral, so I thought, everyone else is having physical. And he goes, no, they're all astral. And I thought, bloody hell, not many people know that. That's amazing.
Yeah, yes. So, I mean, if that's the case, then essentially they are fitting what we understand to be, to be the Djinn.
Why would they look grey, though, the greys? They're a bit boring. Mine one was pretty sexy and exciting. It looked like one of the Cenobites. Okay. Why are they getting the greys?
Well, we have to understand what is the Djinn, and the Djinn go, like I said, go right back in time, but they also appear in the Egyptian era, where they guide the souls to when they die, and this Djinn that does this work is called the it's called a shadow being,
right?
And it literally is a shadow being. Who's
making that clicking noise?
Sorry, I'm trying to find you some information.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And it was it tries to lead the soul, and these are generally what you call shadow people, and the shadow people are they were very popular about 5 or 6 years ago. Everybody was seeing shadow people. I don't know. Are you aware of that? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And from that, I think we get the ET Djinn, the extraterrestrial Djinn, or the Djinn that here we go. Yeah, in ancient Egypt, the shadow people acted as meditators for deceased human beings. So essentially, this kind of alien type creature has been around since ancient Egypt.
Yeah, and I think as well, as I spoke before, Brian Froud, he draws pictures of the Fae. Now, he doesn't do little flittery little insects like other people ridiculously do and kind of make us all dismiss the Fae. He does men, women, and they again have eyes that are portals. I got speaking to him one time. He wouldn't come on the show, but he said the Djinn are all around him all the time. His paintings work as portals. I'll try and put some of them up. Yeah. And they're men, they're pictures of men. I actually was weird, the effect I had on me when I saw. Again, I felt like I wanted to go through the eyes of when I saw them, and I started crying. It gave me a really strong longing feeling, actually. And he says he puts geometric shapes underneath the paint. That's the Djinn guide him to do the geometric shapes, and then he paints on top. So his workshop is like a portal in itself, and I was dying to get in there. I actually even fantasized about going down to his house and climbing through the window. But it's interesting, when I spoke to that, when I was out in the desert with the portal there, not on the time when I went through the portal, but when the Djinn, the one that looked like Pinhead, was there, and the Sheikh, and he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I need a house." And he said, "Would you promise," use a different word than promise, "I had to have a room in that house that would act as a portal for them." And I agreed. But then, a few days later, I thought that, maybe it wasn't right. But, there's Brian Froud. He's blatantly doing it,
Oh, yeah. It's. I mean, people have worked with the Djinn for a very, very, very long time. However, I believe I mentioned this in our earlier sort of phone call, that the closer you get involved with the Djinn, the less likely you will, if you like, ascend into a higher universal mind. You stay within their sort of protective circle, so to speak, the CAF, and essentially people who work with the Djinn always end up a Djinn. It's very, very complicated because within you have something called the Quarin or the Hamzad, and the Hamzad is Jung speaks about this as well. He talks about the shadow self, and the shadow self is the Quarim or Hamzad. This essentially goes back to the Egyptian time, and this will, instead of when you die you get guided to go to a higher level of consciousness, it guides you into what we understand as the CAF, and then literally you're just never in paradise. You're never in tune with the universe again, and
but this happened in the Clive Barker Hellraiser. A lot of the Cenobites were human to start with, and then they joined that world. So yeah. I don't know. He's obviously either working with them, or
yeah, I think he's read something. He's definitely read something, because essentially, what Clive Barker is describing is describing demons, and he's also describing Djinn at the same time. Obviously, some kind of artistic license. However, it is it's a brilliant fantasy story, but he also pulls on the Cartesian philosophy, where all the bodies are ripped to pieces, and of course Descartes said that they are. Don't think of them as demons, think of them as angels setting you free. And by ripping open the body, then the soul has a greater chance to ascend.
But wasn't that what he did to me? Basically, he took my flesh meat off me, he put it in jars, and I was looking at it, and then he got my skeleton, and I felt him. I can remember it now how he felt. He got my neck right at the throat, put fingers on my throat, and went click, and the bones all fell, and then he broke them, and I could literally feel him breaking them. It was a really weird sensation, and Yeah, I was like that. My flesh was like meat on the floor. The organs were stored, and then he asked me, was I happier? I mean, I was happier. I was set free. It was a really weird
Well, there you
experience. And
go.
now
I
you've
mean, yeah,
reminded me, it's exactly like that on that movie Hellraiser. I remember watching that movie and feeling quite excited by them. And I remember I was with a boyfriend at the time, and I thought they're exciting. You know, what are they? I want to get to. And I must say, see, maybe that's why that one is appearing in that way to me, because knowing that I will develop a fascination, I suppose, which I suppose I have got a fascination now, because I'm not going to leave it be. It'll be like a spot I'll have to pick.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's the Djinn have been around, like I said, for a long, long time. The Ulma, who was related to Muhammad, he said that they were invented by the Anunnaki. So they're kind of some kind of alien outside of our world thing. I mean, this is historically written. However, it's very difficult to understand what is a jinn, because of their ability to shapeshift and take other forms. You can't really put your money on what is actually a jinn, because it's incredibly difficult, because their objective is to remain hidden. That's what they do. However, as I said, their influence runs through our society completely. Say, for example, the story of Rumpelstiltskin. You know the story of Rumpelstiltskin?
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, basically. Well, it's a prime example.
Well,
He wants that they need to find Rumpelstiltskin's name.
right.
Yes. And of course, they use everything to get the name, and then they get the name by chance. But once they have the name, he loses all his power, and that's always the thing when you talk to Jinn masters. The first objective is to get the entity's name so that you can control it.
Right.
Yeah, which is really, which is an essential part of Jinn worship. Or you use a Jinn that you know the name of, so that you can call it. Yeah. However, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because it's they live in a feudal system. It's kings, queens, lords, overlords, going right the way down, and essentially you have to get the jinn that you want. You have to go through one of the kings, or one of the masters. There's another race of it as well, and then it depends what jinn they are using. For example, some use Ifrit, some use Marid or Majid. Others use Jan, others use Gahul, and essentially you contact the king, and the king that will then allow you to use this jinn for a certain amount of time. So that's another way that that many people work with the jinn. However, the conclusion is the same. If you work with them for a long time, you never leave this realm of consciousness. You are always stuck in their realm of consciousness.
Is it like the Alice in Wonderland consciousness?
Well, the Alice in Wonderland is a strange one, really. On one level, it's a chess game. I don't know if you know that. It's actually a chess game. On another level, it's an esoteric story. On another level, it's a criticism of late Edwardian, early Victorian society. I mean, he was involved in the occult. I mean, I'm not suggesting for one moment that it's nothing to do with the occult. Mahuka is Crowley.
Oh.
The smoking caterpillar is Crowley.
Oh.
I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when he's saying "Who are you?" it's Aleister Crowley. So,
do you think that? Sorry. Do you
Yeah.
think that Djinn that I saw with the Sheikh is the Sheikh's Djinn? He was a
Well,
Majid. Somebody told me that. I can't remember. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's I don't think a human can own a Djinn. You know, it's you can summon a Djinn. Yeah, it's a very, very complicated process, summoning a Djinn, but it depends what system you use. If you use a system which is within the Quran, they use Surat al-Jinn. It's got 28 verses, and it's made to deal with the invisible creatures. Yeah, and essentially these guys have to sit there and they repeat this surah many, many, many times, up to 1,000 times, and after they've finished repeating this surah, they will then get the Jinn that they wish for. Yeah. Okay. However, the Jinns are very, very confusing because, as I said to you, there are humans who have crossed over into what you would call the Kaf. For example, there is a very, very famous one, Mr. Abdul Karim, and essentially you call on Abdul Karim. Yeah. It's called a dua, it's called a summoning, and he will assist the summoner when they are confronting demons. However, everything that you read about this Jinn, one has to use complete caution. It's a very, very strange world. It's a very complicated world.
Is it a book with that guy in?
I found the guy. It's in my book.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I found my guy.
And just wanted to ask you, it's going back. So it's interesting that I didn't have to summon one. I got one for free, like almost getting one for free in a cereal packet or something.
I doubt you got it for free. I'd imagine that the Sheikh, did a deal with the Jinn, and that you were the prize.
For who? The prize for who?
The Jinn, of course.
Oh, I see. That's a bit cheeky of him because I
Well,
didn't really give permission for that.
Well, they don't need permission. They just need to trick you. That's one of the interesting things in Dracula. Why it's almost certain that he's employed Jinn magic, because Dracula asks him, "Do you want to come in?" Yeah. And of course he says, "Yes, I do want to come in." The moment he comes in, he is bound to Dracula and his magical works. And it's the same thing with the Jinn. Essentially, you have to be very careful because you can easily bind yourself to them in the same way, if that makes any sense.
Right.
There is nothing simple about Jinn magic. People, in many ways, it is very simple. In other ways, it's very, very complicated. It's understanding what Jinn you're talking to, understanding what rank it is, and also understanding what relationship you can have with that Jinn. However, they will contact you if they like you, which is important to understand. So it's but the fact that you met this Jinn and the other guy was with you when you met this Jinn, one would presume it wasn't a natural acquaintance. I believe that the Jinn master introduce the jinn to you for ulterior motives.
What were those?
Well, it's always energy and it's always bodies.
And so why is it now asking me? Well, the first time that he did it was when he basically showed me a portal and told me to go through it, and then I went through it, had that experience, and then it kind of built up to the next bit. The next bit was when I got my body taken away, and then I started to see that.
You can have malevolent jinn and you can have benevolent jinn, yeah? However, you've got to understand that they have no relationship with human beings. Now, in the Quran, it says that they were put on this earth to worship man, yeah? However, that is absolutely full of contradiction, because essentially if they were put on the earth before man, then how can they be there to worship man? Because they were, according to the Quranic law, they were on earth 5,000 years before mankind. But in the Quran it says, they were put there to worship man, but they were on the earth first. If that makes any sense, yeah.
So why do the Muslims know about him and the Christians don't?
Well, if you go back in time, Muhammad wanted a religion, and he wanted everybody to adopt his religion, and he did many things. He pushed monotheism. The one God, monotheism. Yeah, he pushed that very, very strongly, because the Judaic community which he was around believed in monotheism. He also produced the early Gnostic ideas of Jesus Christ. They also threw in quite a lot of ancient Greek mythology into the Quran as well. But however, the jinn were part of Mesopotamia, and they were very, very old. There were many, many people who worshipped the jinn. In fact, they were, they found things recently which described them as the good and, the good God. I'm paraphrasing, but it means that the good gods, they call them. So, they were worshipped a long, long time. And I think that for him to sort of start this new religion, he had to incorporate Allah. Allah being called, if you look at the etymology of Allah, it means the God, yeah, okay? And then this has been taken to mean, the ultimate God. However, Allah is definitely, his roots are definitely a moon god, and he also has daughters. I mean, that was what Salman Rushdie's satanic verses was about. It was an action.
Sorry, what were his verses about?
Well, it was an actual thing. What Allah did, it was an actual thing that Muhammad did. Muhammad suggested, part of the early religion, that people worship the daughters of Allah. Now, if he's suggesting that you worship the daughters of Allah, then essentially Allah is the moon god. And of course, he dropped that because I think it just made it too obvious that he was pushing a pagan deity and calling it a monotheistic god, so to speak. It's a very complicated. I mean, you can see evidence that Allah is the moon god. If you look at the mosque, they always have a moon on it. Why is?
They do.
Yeah. So you cannot deny. I mean, Ramadan starts on a full moon. Yeah. So you cannot deny these facts.
Who is the moon god, though?
Well, there was two. We have two understandings of who the moon god was. If we go right back in time to the time of Solomon, then Balkis or Sheba. She worshipped Sin. Okay, it was a moon god called Sin. Yeah. Now, of course, the Catholic Church says you mustn't sin. Well, of course, Sin was a moon god. Yeah. Okay, and then over the 1,000 years, he then became Al. Yeah, and then from there, it was then shortened to being Allah. Meaning one of the main gods. But essentially, if you look at the history of Allah, he is definitely a moon god. Definitely. It's not just. This is top academics that have written this. It's in my book, by the way.
Cool.
Yeah.
What do you think of Yahweh? Is Yahweh the moon god? Who is Yahweh? He's definitely involved with the Nagas, I would say, because of the Moses and the burning bush, and the snake, the bit where he slams.
The thing is, well, to understand what is a jinn, generally speaking, you have to understand: is it elemental? Okay, yeah, is it fire? Is it water? Is it air? There also is a kind of a spiritual element to them as well, and he's a thunder god, so essentially he's a god of wind, and that's an element. And if it's elemental, then it's a good chance that he is a jinn.
Do you think he's a jinn?
Well, yeah, he's elemental. What else can he be?
So all the jinns are elementals?
Yes, yeah. That's where you get your colours from. For example, when you saw your Marid, he would have been blue. He'd have been dressed in blue. Yeah? Am I correct?
Yeah, like a navy, I think.
Yeah, that was the blue. Now, if you're dealing with a Frit, they are red. Yeah, Jan tend to be green in colour, and then the Shaitan can be black or white, which is quite an interesting combination. The Ghoul are very similar to the Shaitan, so they tend to be black and white as well.
So Yahweh's a jinn. If he's a jinn, what kind of a jinn? Is he a king?
Well, I'd imagine that he's a jinn king, yeah. He's obviously a desert dweller because he's a god of thunder, he's a god of, I think he's an elemental. I think he's a jinn. Everything. Moses is, in early depictions of Moses, he's always shown with horns. There's a very famous medieval print that shows Belial with Solomon, and next to him is Moses, and Moses has horns.
So what does that say about Moses?
Well, Moses was definitely some kind of magician. Once again, the snake is prevalent in Moses' story, yes. and the snake, of course, is a representation of jinn. So but generally speaking, if the creature that you are dealing with, or the entity that you're dealing with, is an elemental creature, then it is what we understand to be jinn.
Where did quite interesting, Yahweh, where did the thunder god, where was he written about before?
Well, we have to go right back in time. We have to go back to sort of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar wanted slaves, so he stole many Jews and took them to what we understand Babylon, Mesopotamia, and there they were kept as slaves. But while they were there as slaves, they picked up quite a lot of the religious influence, Yahweh being one of them. If you study Judaism, there is the Babylonian Talmud, which is different to the normal Talmud. So the evidence is there, and it's the historical evidence is there. And of course, when the Bible was been rewritten and they talk about the Exodus and things like this, realistically, they're probably talking about when Nebuchadnezzar took the Jews to Babylonia.
Oh, I see. And when they were there, they found basically this thunder god.
Yeah,
and
they found the thunder god.
Helped them out.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they were an oppressed people, so they wanted an aggressive, warlike god, and Yahweh fitted the bill. I mean, if we look at the early Vikings used to worship Thor because it suited their philosophy. You know, when they used to land on the English shores, it was like the hammer of God raining down on all these poor, unarmed people. You know, so to make yourself feel better about that, or to hone your psychotic tendencies, you have a god which is extremely violent. If you're being repressed and you want to give yourself power, then essentially you would go for a god which is a thunder god, one that can destroy from a great distance. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So if I buy myself a Babylonian Talmud, a translation, I can read about this thunder god. What did he used to be called?
Well, he's got many names, but one of them is Yahweh. However, there's a lot of contradiction with Judaism because Baal appears in Judaism a lot as well. You know, so when you start studying Judaism, you end up in a very confused place because Judaism they've never really had a kingdom, and they've always stayed with people or races who will protect them. And of course, that's when the Muslims went to Spain. They allowed the Jews to stay there. Remember that the Arabs and Jews, especially that far back in history, I mean, there was very little difference between Arabs and Jews. And they allowed the Jews to stay there. And that's where your Kabbalah came from. Your Kabbalah came, as we understand it, came from that period when the Jews were living in Spain. So, you know, wherever they go, they always get the religious influence.
Right. And so if I wanted to track down the thunder god, I just have to read the Talmud, or should I?
Well, I mean, if you read the Talmud, you read you read the Old Testament and stuff like that. You know, you're going to find you're going to find your thunder god. I mean, that's where he is. I mean, there are many scholars who believe that the Jesus was preaching against these Babylonian gods, and that was the big problem why they didn't like him, because essentially he was saying that these are not the gods of the Jews, these are the gods of the Babylonians.
So who was the gods of the Jews?
Well, this is the great question, because we don't know. Realistically, the Romans destroyed any evidence of early Bibles, and that includes the Jewish Bible as well. They just destroyed everything, and then they rewrote it. I mean, the English did exactly the same to the Hindus when they invaded India. They literally destroyed many of the religious texts and rewrote them to how they wanted them to fit. That's why it's incredibly difficult if you go to India to find anybody who can teach you real Hinduism, so to speak. And it's now the same with Buddhism. I mean, Buddhism, the Chinese are rewriting Buddhism, and they're also rewriting Christianity. I mean, in it, Jesus has ended up quite an awful character, because they've rewritten the Bible in Chinese, and Jesus has come out of it, as quite a disdainful character. Whenever a country invades another country, they always rewrite the history, and of course one of the best ways to do that is to rewrite the myths or to rewrite the religious ideology.
If you take, I just want to, because we're running out of time a bit. Thank you for that. That was great stuff. The serial killer question about, I think we brought it up at the end of the other show last week. But say Brady, for instance, a serial killer that I met, he said that he had a face of death, a green disembodied head that appeared in front of him, and he basically offered sacrifices, and he buried, his victims face down out on the wild moors, and said, he did it as offering. And he said to me in a letter, I'm in credit now. Is that like some kind of jinn worship? I always thought that there was some kind of magic involved, whether it's unconscious or not.
I mean, if you for what I understand about the Moors murderers, they killed their victims in a very painful way, and once again, it's this exchange of energies. And I think you could safely say that Brady was definitely convinced that he had contact with some supernatural energy. Whether or not he knew it was a jinn is another thing. Yeah, it's very, very difficult, because there is a difference between the jinn and the demon. The demon allegedly are born from fallen angels, whereas the jinn come from the calf. So they realistically the demon, as we understand it, is quite Christianized, which is if you tell Satanists this, they'll get very ironic about it. But in reality, the Satan, as we understand it, was an angel chosen by God to be the adversary.
Oh, you said that the other day. Can I just ask, the calf goes around the earth, though, doesn't it? It's not just out in the Middle East. You said it surrounds the whole earth. Yes. So that's including England as well. It's not just out there in the desert land.
Yeah, it goes around the whole world. Once again, it really depends on, where you get your sources from. Where do the jinn come through? There's people say it's Oman. There's other people say it's some other mountain range where they come through, and that's how they come to Earth. There's many contradictions, because on one level the jinn are not supposed to be able to go over salt water. However, if the calf surrounds the Earth, then there's really nothing stopping them from going to any level of the Earth. Yeah. You can see in ancient Buddhist and Hindu reliefs, it shows the world in a very different way. And if you speak to proper gurus, they will tell you that these maps you can't follow, because once again you end up into a place which is the calf. Which is, which is very interesting.
Do you think that these people that are doing these, people find it in the cattle mutilations and that, is that a certain form of jinn that maybe eats their organs? They do seem fond of separating bone and flesh. It seems to be their thing a little bit.
Well, it certainly fits the ghoul. What we understand is the ghoul. Yeah.
What do they do with that flesh?
Well, they eat it. They eat it.
Why do they want to eat it?
Well, that's what they do. That's their thing. They live on flesh, usually human flesh. So I suppose if they can't get human flesh, they go for animal flesh.
I think, like with Brady, people say, "Oh, there's a child murder," but also, he did kill an adult. The last murder was where he tried to get someone else involved. He had Marilyn involved, and he probably killed before he met her. And same as the Hillside Stranglers, who Bianchi killed before he met Bono, and then roped in Angelo Bono in the murders, and then killed after on his own as well, just to prove it. And Brady, of course, led Hinley, and then he brought in another man, David Smith. And then that last murder was when he brought a teenager back to his house, murdered him with an axe as a surprise, and then proceeded to chop him up. And that sounds to me like a jinn sacrifice, because of the amount of, the guy was screaming, and there was some kind of sexuality involved as well. There was so many people, well, 3, 4, I suppose, including the victim, 4 people present. Would that have been some kind of djinn sacrifice? Actually, that is, to me, again, going back to the film Hellraiser, like they brought the victims home to the house and then proceeded to, blood everywhere. I mean, what does that sound like to you?
Well, I mean, if you ever, there's a survey recently done, I think, was it by the CDF or something in America, to do with Arabic people, and they said that insanity was caused by the jinn. Now, he went for a plea of insanity, I believe, did Brady. However, it's convenient, but whether or not he was possessed by a jinn, I would imagine is probably highly likely, because it fits how some of the jinn operate.
Which one?
Definitely. Well, once again, it'd be like the ghoul, or it'd be probably the shaitan. They're really into this kind of violence.
Why?
Well, because they don't like humans.
Why not?
Well, they were put on the earth first. The God came along and said, well, yeah, you've cleaned up the place, it's great, so I've brought these humans, they are now your boss. Yeah, but they'd lived on the earth for something like, I think it was 5,000 years before humans turned up.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, if, imagine you've got your house, and then tomorrow somebody knocks on the door and says, oh, you've got these guys living with you, how are you going to be about it? You're going to be annoyed, aren't you?
But it's pretty, I don't know if I'd want to watch them being axed up, just chopped up, literally. I mean, are they that's pretty...
Sorry, you've cut out.
Sorry, it's all a bit butcher shop, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the thing is you do not, sort of give any form of morality to, human morality to the jinn, because they are not human on any stretch of the imagination. They are creatures that live in a different world called the Kaf. They run on energy. They are capable of doing anything. There are benevolent and there are malevolent ones. These people deliberately go out their way to contact these creatures, and if you're not careful, then essentially you will become a puppet for them.
I don't fancy that one. I can hear the music playing out.
Yeah, I can.
We'll end on that creepy note.
I think you've been a great guest, Brian, and we'll see you again at the show, and I will put links below, I put it on YouTube where people can get hold of you.
Okay, brilliant.
As well on Facebook. Thanks very much, Brian. Hello to you. And thank you listeners for listening.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.